So today, as promised, I'm going to look at the two worst teams so far this season in MLS. That is the San Jose Earthquakes and Inter Miami. And not only the fact that both of these teams are the only two teams that have yet to register a win this season, but both of these teams are sitting at the bottom of their respective conference so far, with the Quakes sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference with an 0-2 and 3 record and only had 2 points. They scored 6 goals so far this season, but 11 goals so far, and had a goal differential of -5. While for Inter Miami, it's even worse. 0-1 and 4 to start the season, and they have also lost 4 games in a row coming out of match week number 5. Only have 1 point and only scored 3 goals this season, while allowing a league high 13 goals and have a goal differential of -10. And what's interesting when I look at both of these teams, and I think I've said this before, the problem for both of these teams are very similar. I mean, both of these teams have head coaches that clearly is unpopular within their fan base and want them to be fired. And then you also have the issue with the front office, where I would say that the issue with the front office maybe more has to do with what's going on with Inter Miami. I mean, I'm not saying that the Quakes don't have issue with the front office. I mean, there's still some issue too, but at least it's kind of more well known for a while. Whereas here, it seems like the fans are clearly being betrayed with the way that the front office promised so many things and they have failed to deliver whatsoever. But also they have had problems in terms of every part of the field that both of these team has. So yeah, today, like I said, I'm going to take a look at what has gone on and why both of these teams are off to such a bad start, like that deem them as the two worst team in MLS so far this year. And let's take a look at the Quakes and look at the result that they had. Now, on the first game of the season, they lost 3-1 in the game against the Red Bulls, which I, of course, attended that one. And let's just say, yeah, that was not a fun game to attend, especially with the way that the Red Bulls really outplayed the Quakes in that game, and probably could have won more if the Red Bulls were a little bit more clinical. Now, the very next week, they got a free draw against Columbus, but don't let that scoreline distract you for the fact that if it wasn't for Francisco Calvo, whom, I've said many times that I really dislike the fact that the Quakes signed him, and this performance maybe will kind of overshadow the fact that he as expected has not been great for the Quakes. But if it wasn't for him scoring 2 goals in that one, and Columbus completely imploded in the last 15 minutes and also having a man advantage, the Quakes would have lost that one too. But they got a free draw on that one, and then the very next week, unsurprisingly, going to what is now the best team in the league, that is the Philadelphia Union, and losing to them 2-0. And then the very next week, when they play against Minnesota in a game where, yes, the Loons only won 1-0 against the Quakes, but don't let that distract you from the fact that, if it wasn't for the Loons being also not clinical in terms of their finishing, the scoreline would have been much different. And throughout that game, there was not one point of the game that I thought the Quakes even tried to come back, even when they were 1-0 down for majority of the game. And then the game that they just recently had, again, this was a game that, don't let the scoreline distract you for the fact that, if it wasn't for Austin decided to just kind of implode in the second half, and Josh Wolf decided that parking the bus even against the one of the worst team in the league is a good idea, the Quakes probably wouldn't have come back from that result. So, what's going on with the Quakes? And actually, before I do that, let's talk about Inter Miami and their result. So, as I said, they start the season with a 0-0 draw against Chicago, which at that point, after the result, with the way that they played, that was actually pretty good performance for Inter Miami, and people thought that maybe things were going to be okay for this team, despite the fact that, coming into the season, I think if you want to talk about expectation and who has really failed expectation even more, I would say it has to be the Quakes. I mean, I know Inter Miami, some fans might have some unrealistic expectation that this team should once again be a playoff team, but knowing how they just blow up their entire team this offseason, and almost like they're literally start from scratch, I am not surprised the fact that they're off to such a bad start. But with the Quakes, again, this is also where we're going to talk about what's going on, and my biggest fear that, with Almeida, clearly don't want to be there, and my fear of him just deliberately trying to kind of sabotage this team. I thought the talent was there with this team, but like I said, that's what we're gonna get to, the what's going on and why my biggest fear with this team did did came to fruition, at least in the first 5 games. But with Inter Miami, after that game when they got a 0-0 draw, they got absolutely frauded by Austin. 5-1 was that result. Then they lost 2-0 against LAFC in a game where it was, it was kind of a meh performance. It wasn't really a performance that's going to get a lot of Inter Miami fans angry, because anytime when you play against LAFC, which is another team that is known as one of the best team in the league and are tied with the Union for the best point total so far this season, there's really no shame in terms of that. But what is a shame is the very next game when they lost 3-1 to FC Cincinnati in that game. And then probably the rock bottom moment of this season. That 3-1 loss against Cincinnati has to be near rock bottom with the way that Miami tends to still have a good record against Cincinnati. But the rock bottom moment has to be just this past week, where they lost to the Houston Dynamo, a team that have not won a single game in over 500 plus days, and in their last 26 road games. Yeah, that is definitely bad. And especially with the way that I mentioned, that was also kind of, I would say, a rebuilding derby, with both of these teams kind of rebuilding heading into this year. And I have said multiple times that the Dynamo has at least made some progress compared to what Inter Miami is doing right now. And it's no surprising that the Dynamo was able to get a win in that one. Though, again, it's got to be absolutely humiliating when you lose to a team that is almost as sure thing as you getting a single point, with them struggling so much on the road, and yet you still lost that one. So let's look at what's going on and why it's been such a bad start for the Quakes. And like I said, for Almeida, I said this in the beginning of the season, and I'm not sure if people kind of believe me. I just had a feeling that he's going to deliberately screw up this team, and especially from what I heard in the preseason, where Almeida has tried these crazy kind of formation, like going free at the back, and even putting guys out of position, like Jackson Yo, putting him in a center back position when he clearly is not a CB. I was definitely concerned, but I also thought that maybe that was just preseason, and usually head coach, they do crazy things in preseason, but when they realize that it's not working, then they probably would stop doing it. But I also thought that I won't be surprised if Almeida would do it, because Almeida has literally slated this front office and this ownership about how he is very frustrated with them not able to give him the funds to bring in the players that he wants. Which, again, some of the things that he has slated to the front office and the owners are not totally incorrect. It's you can definitely see that Almeida definitely needs the funds to maybe build some of the players that he wants. But what's is kind of maybe contradict what Almeida says, that he's not able to bring in the players that he wants, is that he kind of have done. So when you look at some of the signings that they had, and that some of the money that they pay with guys like Andy Rios, Carlos Fierro, and even Eric Remedi, who is considered Almeida's guy, they have not really performed. And those kind of amount that they spend, it is a big amount of money for a team that, as I said, has been one of the most cheapest run team in the past couple of years, and right now probably the cheapest run team, maybe even right up there with the Colorado Rapids being and owned by a team that refused to spend some money. But again, it just feels like with the way that Almeida clearly doesn't want to be there and continue to kind of attack the front office and the ownership. You just kind of had a feeling this is not going to go well. I know for a fact that it doesn't matter if you have an impressive team, and that you can maybe even put let's say an LAFC level kind of squad into this Quakes team. I can guarantee you that this team will not succeed, even with an LAFC level type of team. Why? Because the head coach doesn't clearly shown that he doesn't want to be there. And how many times I've said, if you're a player and you basically are playing under a head coach that has deliberately said that he doesn't want to be here, why would you want to play for that head coach? And it's unsurprised that a lot of these players are clearly not playing for Almeida, which also kind of brings me to the next point of the fact that, well, why don't they just fire Almeida? It's pretty easy for them to do so, especially with some of the things that Almeida have said to the front office and to the owner. Well, here's the problem. They kind of can't do it because they do have have this clause where if they do fire Almeida, they of course have to pay him a huge sum of money. And as I mentioned, the Quakes, one of the cheapest team in the league, and they kind of feel like if they do decide to let go of Almeida, they simply just cannot afford the release clause that they're going to have to pay for Almeida if they want to get rid of him. So basically, this is where the front office really kind of get themselves into a pickle, and it's also kind of a situation where, again, when Almeida does arrive with the Quakes, I mean, you got to also question of who actually was negotiating that clause, and that now that the Quakes did not do a good job in terms of negotiating what kind of contract Almeida was in. When if they do find some in this situation, that's what then things are not going to go well. And unsurprisingly, they find themselves in this situation where they want to let go of Almeida, but they can't because they can't afford to pay him, and it's just kind of frustrating, and it continued to this ongoing debate of the fact that, well, who's exactly it is right there. Do you agree that the front office is doing the right thing in terms of keeping Almeida around because they simply can't pay them, or do you think that it's clearly wrong to do so? I mean, a lot of people will say it's clearly wrong, but again, with this team being run as one of the cheapest team in the league, I mean, it's kind of there's really no right answer in terms of this situation that the Quakes, of course, find themselves in. And then, of course, the other thing that has gone wrong for this team is, besides the goalkeeping, there's problem at every part of the field. And it feels like I've been saying this almost every single season, where there's not really one season where I said that at least one part of this team is actually multiple part of this team is decent. I mean, last year I thought the midfield was going to be that. Oh boy, that midfield that I thought was the strength of our team. This season, it's been like a revolving door at time. And as I mentioned, besides goalkeeping and besides JT Marcinkowski, who I even think that even the goalkeeping, you could argue that there's been some issue, because as great as Marcinkowski has been in terms of making some big save and at time bailed out this Quakes defense, he has also had some bonehead plays of himself, and also just some goals that you just feel like he clearly shouldn't have gave up. And an example of that is the last game against Austin, where, like I said, as great as that goal that Urrutia scored, Marcinkowski should not be catching himself in such a position like that, or got himself in a situation like that where he just kind of get caught being out too far of goal, and by the time when he realized that mistake, it was already too late. So yeah, I mean, basically there is problem on every part of the field. The defense sucks, the midfield also sucks, and the attack can barely generate anything going on most of the days. And then, of course, the next part kind of goes back to what I said about Almeida and the fact that you can clearly see these players are not playing for Almeida. Like this is kind of the cost of the way that when this front office decided to bring in a bunch of these new players and try to field a team that clearly is used to basically do well if Almeida does release, that's great. But the problem is Almeida is still with this team, so it just creates a very, very weird kind of mixture where you have players that could do well under a new head coach, but that new head coach is not there with Almeida. It's unsurprising that things have not worked out whatsoever. And like I said, I don't believe any of these players are not really playing their full potential and showing intensity and cohesion when you have a head coach that clearly are saying that he's gone by the end of this year. And then, of course, the other thing that went wrong for this team and why this team is off to a slow start is all the signings when the offseason has not worked whatsoever. So guys like Jamiro Montero, he has barely showed up so far this year. Jan Gregush, at times he looked like a guy that maybe that's kind of the reason why Minnesota actually decided to let him go. I mean, I know for a long time that I thought Jan Gregush was going to do well with the Quakes because you have an experienced MLS or proven experienced MLS player, which I've been saying that's something that the Quakes need to do for many years, and yeah, it just doesn't seem like that is kind of the case. And then if you, of course, look at the back, I mean, I already talked about Francesco Calvo, and that I think that was probably the least surprising move that did not worked out for this team. Though I will say that at least Calvo has scored those goals that he did against Columbus, because if he hasn't, yeah, again, I think there would have been even more criticism, where there's been times where he's been at fault at some of the goals that the Quakes, of course, have conceded. Now let's take a look at Inter Miami and what's going on with this team and why they've been off to a slow start. Phil Neville continued to be inept with his tactics and the team selection. I mean, I don't think that should surprise anybody. I mean, I said it last season. It is a big surprise that this team did not let go of Phil Neville with the way that he's clearly not the guy to lead this rebuild. And unfortunately, as much as I know the Inter Miami fan base demand Neville to be fired for this team, it's probably not going to happen, and it's not going to be like the Quake situation, but more like, how Phil Neville is basically the right-hand man of David Beckham. I mean, unless if David Beckham realized that, yeah, Phil Neville is clearly not the guy, and he needs to put friendship aside in terms of getting this team back to where he envisioned that this team would be. Yeah, I don't think anything is going to change, and that it sucks the fact that Neville is going to have to continue to coach this team as long as if the front office still feel like it's okay for him to do so, because he has a great relationship with David Beckham. There's no leaders on this team, and it's unsurprising that there's no leaders on this team, because that's been kind of the case for this Inter Miami team in their first 3 seasons. Like last season, who's the leader on this team? I mean, Gonzalo Higuain surely ain't the leader. He's spent more time in terms of complaining to his teammate to actually be the leader of this team. And then you look at other part of the field, like even their captain, for most part of them, are not really true leader of this team. So yeah, when you don't have a leader on this team, you don't have that go-to guy that you that can get the squad ready for every match day and basically get them back on track if they face some hard time. It's no surprise that there's been times where this team has just completely capitulated and looked very disorganized at time. The rebuild that they've been embarked on has not gained any traction whatsoever, and a lot of that has to be with some of the placeholder and some of the players that they thought that are going to do well, and part of the rebuild and trying to form themselves a good core. Yeah, they of course have not done well whatsoever. Now, I will say that to play devil's advocates in terms of that, it is still early days, and I know when you are a team that basically just completely blowed up a team and kind of almost start as an expansion kind of team with you making so many signings, it's going to be bad to start the season. I mean, when you look at other expansion team, and even with Charlotte this season, even with the 2 wins that they had, they're kind of a team that looked like a very expansion kind of team where there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And so far, as much as the rebuild that they're embarked on has not gained any traction, maybe this beginning part is the growing pain. But like I said, it doesn't help. This is why, as much as I said the word rebuild involved with this team, if you say that to any Inter Miami fans, they would hate you, because they will not admit that they are on a deep rebuild, and especially with the expectation and how much hype that is surround this team. This team should not be going through a rebuild after just three year into existence. So yeah, I mean, this is why that, as much as they are trying to rebuild, they're not doing a good job in terms of hiding the fact that, yeah, this is a true deep rebuild, and that we are going through this growing pains of the fact that they're just losing pretty much every single week. And then the last thing, of course, with this team is that they pretty much have problem in every part of the field, just like the Quakes. I mean, the goalkeeping situation is still a huge question mark. I mean, Nick Marsman, who was back in goal for this, he had a terrible game. The previous guy that they put in goal, Drake Kalenda, not doing well whatsoever. And then even Clement Diop, who I thought when he comes to this Miami team, he's going to be the guy that could be a huge upgrade to the previous 2 goalkeeper that he has. And even then, he's not having a good start in his time with Miami. I mean, ever since I think Luis Robles retired from his playing career, this Inter Miami team have not found any decent goalkeeper whatsoever. And then also you look at the defense. I mean, there's a reason why they conceded 13 goals this season. Like, their defense has just at times inconsistent in some of these games. The midfield is also an absolute mess, and then going forward in the attack, even their best player, Gonzalo Higuain, as I said, he's been spending more times complaining to his teammate not passing the ball than actually decided to to make to maybe help his teammate out. I mean, when you're a guy that is a big name, I get it. You want to have the ball as much as possible, but it's also, there's one thing in terms of that, then there's another in terms of him just really just want to have the ball and just almost being very aggressive to his teammate to not pass the ball to him, and not to mention with the way that we already know that Higuain does not have a good morale, and that there's times where he even become very lazy when things are not going his way. I mean, that pretty much sums up the tenure that Gonzalo Higuain has had with this team. I mean, I feel like he was only here just for maybe for the paycheck on or vacation, rather than him playing for this team and actually winning. Because so far, when you look at his tenure with this team, there's no part of me saying that he come to Inter Miami really to light up this league and basically be the catalyst of this Inter Miami team. He's just been a guy that has been arrogant at time, has been a guy that has repeatedly not built any chemistry with this team, and also at times being super lazy and just almost like he doesn't even want to be there at times. So yeah, I mean, there is some problems in every part of the field of this team, and again, that's expected with the way that when you completely blow up this team, it's going to take time for a lot of the parts of this team to be built into a solid core. But to kind of finish up with this video, talking about both of these teams that are off to a slow start, and if you ask which team can finally get off the schneid and finally turn around their season, I mean, short term, I would say the Quakes have the best chance. I mean, I know this team obviously is not doing well, but there's been times that at least I would say, especially with some of the comebacks that they have, at least they're still trying, and that if this team does eventually get rid of Almeida and even bring in an interim head coach, I think the energy of this team will be much stronger compared to Inter Miami, where, even if they get rid of Phil Neville, I still think that when you look at this team is still not good enough in terms of competing against anyone in a competitive basis. But I will say that in terms of the long term of who can maybe turn around their terrible start to the season, if you maybe include like these next couple of years in terms of long term, I would go with Inter Miami, with the way that at least this team is on a rebuilding process, and once they do get the pieces and the core to do so, which I trust that this team would do. I mean, after all, their GM Chris Henderson, even though I know he hasn't really done the best job as he did with Seattle building a decent squad, I still think that this is partially because of the fact that Inter Miami is still under sanction of that scandal that they had a couple of years, and it's kind of really handcuffed in terms of who can they sign and who they can afford to because of that sanction. And not to mention, they clearly have the owners to that is not afraid to open the pockets if they need to do so. I can't say the same thing about the Quakes. I mean, at least I will say that at least with the GM and with Chris Leach, I do trust that he, of course, would do a good job in terms of fielding the team. But my problem with it is that, when the Quakes did hire Chris Leach, I wonder a lot of that, is it because of the fact that he's kind of like a yes man for this Quakes team, and that he's also a guy that maybe is not going to be revolutionized in terms of signing some big name player and spending some money with this team. Because after all, we know the biggest issue with the Quakes. Like, the biggest issue for this team is not just Almeida, but the biggest issue, and really the reason why this team has been so mediocre year in year out, is because they have an owner that clearly doesn't care and doesn't want to spend some money. And you can even see it in the owner, and I don't even want to name him because you guys probably know who he is. You can even see his other team that he's currently owning is not doing well. In fact, his other team that he's owning, which is the Oakland A's, is basically doing a fire sale right now. And I just feel like this could be the case again with the Quakes, even with the decent roster that they currently have. But either way, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and let me know in the comments below who you think out of these two teams will finally get things back on track. I mean, I can definitely tell that both of these teams are not going to be a playoff team. But it's going to be interesting to see as the season goes along whether or not if both of these teams is going to improve. Because if that's not the case, well, we have a good battle for the wooden spoon. I mean, Inter Miami and the San Jose Earthquakes. I mean, I don't think these two teams were teams that I predicted to win the wooden spoon, even though I predicted the Quakes were going to finish last in the West, I still didn't think that they were going to be in contention to do so. But at least early on, it seems like that is the case, and it's going to be interesting if, when both of these teams continue to suck, who exactly is going to, unfortunately, get the dubious honor of winning the wooden spoon. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.